I'm Terry Sunderland. I'm Professor of Tropical Forestry in the Faculty of Forestry, and I teach agroforestry and natural resource planning within the faculty. Well, agroforestry is an age-old integration of trees into farming and cropping systems. And one of the aspects I study is not just the production function of the trees, but also the ecosystem services they provide to the crops. So, for example, some of our research in Ethiopia shows that the proximity of wheat production to tree patches and forests increases both micronutrient levels, particularly zinc and molybdenum, because of the nutrients in the soils, but also higher yields through shade and other beneficial aspects of the ecosystem services provided by those forest patches or trees on the farms. Nutrient cycling is particularly important with trees in many of the production systems that we work with, and we see much more resilience to vicissitudes in climate, so extremes of climate, heat, droughts, etc., are often mitigated by a certain level of tree introduction into cropping systems. It's an emerging field, and I'm amazed that there isn't a much more pronounced initiative to promote trees on farms in British Columbia, and we've seen the effects of the heat dome, we've seen the effects of the catastrophic flooding. Much of that would have been mitigated, particularly for farmland, if trees had been integrated into these farming systems through windbreaks, stabilising soil, etc. And we've seen the research of some of our workers in faculty, particularly in our forestry facility, showing that clear cuts increase soil erosion, damage and runoff from flooding. And so planting trees in agricultural systems is going to mitigate some of those extreme environmental shocks. People's understanding of the ecosystem services that are provided by forests and trees and particularly forests on farms. And what we see, we've recorded in a number of countries that people's perceptions of ecosystem service provision change over time as they are diminished, if you like. So we see the loss of trees and forests and particularly trees on farms, that we see a concomitant loss of ecosystem services. And instead of actually monitoring the services themselves, we found a very strong correlation between people's perceptions of the provision of those ecosystem services as much as anything else. The main barriers to agroforestry is it's usually farmer-led. Certainly in the countries that I work in the tropics, it's very much farmer initiatives. There's very little government support for promoting trees on farms, which I find staggering when you think of the subsidies that are provided for monoculture agriculture. And why don't we have the same subsidies for agroforestry? And I think about the context of British Columbia, why aren't there stronger incentives for farmers to plant trees on their farms or have set-aside land to protect waterways or steep slopes? And it seems almost perversely, a disincentive, because there are no incentives to do so. And it's an expensive activity, planting trees on farms and maintaining them. And so those commitments to restoration, of which agroforestry could easily be a part, are going to fall short if we're not going to be promoting financial incentives for people to plant trees. Trees are good, and don't think of the Saskatchewan wheat fields as the only model of agricultural development. Complex agroforestry systems can be equally productive, but more importantly, they're extremely resilient to both environmental and economic shocks. And you see the most successful farmers, particularly in the tropics, are those that have multi-strata systems, so a tree canopy, an understory, a mid-level canopy of different products, different commodities growing in the single space. And they are the most successful and usually the most wealthy in their communities. By incorporating trees on farms, you're increasing the biodiversity value exponentially, and providing different layers, if you like, of production systems increases the biodiversity. You have extra pollination services. Certain trees and bushes attract pollinators that will obviously pollinate crops and other production systems. And just the increase of species is going to have an exponential increase in biodiversity value. And I think the most surprising thing that I've learned from working in agroforestry, particularly in the tropics, is just how much of the world's food is produced by smallholders without external support, without government support, without subsidies. And it's estimated up to 70% of the world's food is grown in small, complex, diverse systems about 1 hectare in size by self-sufficient smallholder farmers who play an incredibly important role in global food security.